Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and we're looking at a scene in Foundry right now. You're seeing what is essentially a finished scene. This came out in the last release, and I'm going to show you how we made the. We're going to make one of those scenes that you just saw. We're going to go into Dungeondraft, and today's session is a design session. You're looking at one of the rooms or scenes that I've already had designed here. And in the same screen, we're going to design the next one. But you can see the level of detail here. This is the new assets, the new industrial assets. And the detail density is the goal, as you know. And if you get the right assets like you got here, you can put together what you just saw very, very easily. It's shockingly easy. It's something that you couldn't, if you had, a month in Photoshop, you probably couldn't do that level of detail, but we're going to do one in what is essentially about a 30, 40-minute overall design session. I sped it up by about 50%, and we're going to start from scratch, and you're going to watch me as we go here design another room that uses a bit similar motif to the one that we just scanned through here a second ago. So we're going to start just by laying out shapes for our rooms. I don't use the room builder in Dungeondraft, as you know, because it's not flexible enough. I like to just start with my basic shapes. I don't really know what this room is going to look like, but I'm just going to add some shapes to it just to change the dimension from a square to something else. As we draw our circle, we want to just make sure that we're drawing a perfect circle. And we'll delete these shapes later. This is just to block out our room and start to give us some inspiration on how this thing might be designed. I like drawing little rooms coming off of rooms as well. As you know, this will become a prefab tile for VTT. And so, I'm going to end up what I call green screening, or in this case, white screening the background here. So we've got this new asset for a metal wall that I really like. And when we get down here to where we have the curve, I'm going to draw a new wall, and I want the wall to follow the circle. So I'm going to overdraw the lines just so that I can get that perfect circle shape. If you try to just, spline it, you never really get a perfect circle shape. So we're going to draw this according to the circle first, and then we'll just delete some of our wall lines and back it to where we want it to be. I'm going to just vary this up a little bit. Let's turn off our curved corners, make them nice and square. We'll have this section be more of like a stone wall. Looks good. Continue on. All right, so now we can address our curved corners. I'm just going to move or delete some of these points, and you can see it leaves the curve exactly where I want it and just readjusts everything. Perfect. So now we've got a perfect curve on that corner there. As usual, as you know, I always start my maps by getting a sense of dimension. We're going to grab the 2x shadow path, the half shadow. We're going to go up to level 4, just under the wall layer. That way, when we put things down later, they'll be occluded by the shadow. And I'm just going to draw shadows around the edges. When I go to a curve, I am putting 3 points, a point, and then you hit the point of the curve, and then another point, just to make that round the curve properly. And you don't have to be exact here because the wall itself is drawing your shape for you. You don't have to worry about the shadow underneath it so much. Okay, so now we've got a sense of depth. Our walls are starting to rise up for us. And just kind of evaluating the space, I want there to be some variation in elevation within the space. I want this to be an interesting tactical map. So we're going to think about kind of subspaces within this larger room. Now I've got these new clockwork and pipes and valves and other components. There's so much here. These are, again, very, very rich in detail. And don't just look at the asset itself, look at the edges of these assets as you spin them around, the edges, the corners. They all are sub assets. Like being able to rotate something around and get a different, a different piece of it exposed. This is how you use these assets. They're not just one dimensional. They're kind of like 12 dimensions. There's 12 different kinds of edges and surfaces and things like that as you rotate it, spin it, and put it where it should go. And we're just going to start blocking out some parts of the space. I think this is going to be a space down here. Might change that shape later. And just kind of looking at all of the assets that are available, seeing how they fit into the space. And another thing to think about when you're working with these assets is they merge and kit bash together very, very well. You take two things totally unrelated, put them together, and you've got a new asset. All right, so we're going to play around with some of the metal flooring. This idea is that this is going to be maybe a part of a sewer or maybe like a metal kind of a machine shop, maybe something converted. And let's see, let's look at maybe some of the toppers. Here's a nice piece. So this is kit bashed from all of the components that you just saw, and you can make your own kit bashed creations. I was playing Baldur's Gate 3, and there was a scene in the sewers where you were confronted with just this, massive pipes and valves and things like that. And I thought, that would be really neat to create something like that here. Let's just take some of these pipes and valves and kit bash them together. You can see I'm just kind of rotating it around, seeing how the light hits it, putting one thing on top of another, and it creates this huge sense of the verticality and space. And you can see how these different components themselves kit bashed from the smaller components available. And when you merge them all together, it just works, right? It makes this sort of cacophony of objects that if you had tried to design one at a time, it would take you forever. But because the assets themselves have the detail in them, they kit bash really well. These little walls, I think I want to like try to create a division here between this space and other spaces. I like this platform. I'm thinking maybe I put some kind of, clockwork thing there, or maybe there's something happening on that platform at some point when I, take this into a VTT. But let's use these little subwalls and create this vertical space. I not only want this separated with walls, but I want it to be sort of standing up off of the rest of the floor. All right, this would be a place or space where players can climb up to and have encounters or access controls. Here I'm just kit bashing some more pieces, right? I wanted some tanks in the background, and I just had that piece that already had some of these tanks kind of kit bashed together. I just put it underneath the other one, and now I've got this, again, this nice, huge, chunky piece of equipment that really tells a story. Now I found this platform that's already got these pieces. Again, kit bash from other pieces. You can make other platforms like this just with components. This one is just already put together. And I like the idea of players having to sort of come up that ramp and coming up into this place. So now let's help the eye realize that this is set up above everything else. Let's get back to our paths and let's make a nice, deep, long path. Really show the difference between, the top space and the bottom space. And once you lay your path, you can experiment. You can get, I'm going to select these and let's select like a darker version of it. Really kind of set those apart. Yeah, that looks good. now I really want to make sure that the top part and those walls kind of meld into the floor. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at laying another path down. And we'll do a double path this time, so it's shaded on both sides. And all we're doing is just helping that wall merge. You see that very bright transition from the wall to the occluded shadow under it. We want to help that transition by putting a little shadow over both, and that'll help merge them together. We'll switch to our shadow object and just kind of start painting some shadows underneath the rest of this. And I'll show you here also with the platforms, these metal platforms, you have shadows and they're all colorable. So you can make the shadow of the platform sort of any color or shade that you want. It's not like you'd make it red, but you might make it 25% black instead of 50%, that kind of thing. We'll just kind of lay these out here, a slight angle. It's looking good. Let's just add some more contraptions, some more dials and other things. Let's just really fill this thing out and give players plenty of things that they can interact with. Once I get it into Foundry, this might be something where, I might have them using Monk's active tiles, interact with a few different dials to kind of adjust maybe what's happening in those tanks, things like that. And let's put some shadows under here. We want to create some separation also between the gears and whatnot and the floor underneath them, really make it feel like it's up off the ground. And you can see we've created a really compelling sort of sub area to this. I'm going to try to center my staircase a little bit. Yeah, it's feeling good. I mean, look at the amount of detail for the time that it took to construct this, right? And that's really the goal. Now, when your players play this, they'll just be struck by the detail. They'll focus on that level of detail. It'll be very immersive. And then when the lighting is on it and things like that, it just really comes alive. But you'll also notice I don't build in such details that it forces a story. Like I want to keep it generic enough that you can add those kinds of things later. Add them as tiles, make something interactive, but I don't want to have too much storytelling in the map itself because that's really kind of your job. I just want to lay the groundwork for you to be able to, take that inspiration and take it forward. Just experimenting with this path. I love these paths. You can draw these catwalks, really kind of going anywhere and then in curves and things like that. I like this idea of this hallway that has this completely metal floor. I want my players to encounter, maybe this is their first room that they enter. They haven't even seen the larger room yet, and they'll just be walking on this metal floor. Just making some adjustments so floor and everything fit. I'm also looking at all of the grid squares and just making sure that everything's lining up with players with their tokens as they come through. I'd like to avoid tokens being on like half squares and things like that. I really feel like I want to continue this metal floor strategy. So we'll leave it at 1.5. We'll turn on snap to grid and we'll keep drawing. Yeah, we'll keep drawing this floor. And that's feeling pretty good. I like this idea of the players, come in or they leave on that metal floor, but that the floor itself is raised. So we'll drop in one of these metal staircases, make sure that it lines up with the grid underneath it, because this is where players are going to be accessing those stairs and with them on a clean grid square. and just looking at some of the assets and what might play well here, like underneath this catwalk. Lots of really great new assets like pipes and other things that you can draw across the floor and across walls. Recommend that if you are a Patreon and you get access to these assets, which are available now, you can also get access to this file that we're working on, this map file, and you can see all of the different scenes that I built, deconstruct them, see how I built them, see how the assets interact together, things like that. And I'm mostly trying to stick with all the new assets, but I am going to be using some other assets in the library. There's quite a few at this point. And you'll see more. By the time this comes out, we're going to be just a couple of days away from the January release, and there's going to be even more of these sort of industrial assets, but with the usual twist and new things that you haven't seen before. Now, I want to just put these pipes over the walls. I want this to really feel like it's part of like a sewer or something like that. And so these just really give you a quick and easy way of creating that feeling. Also varies your walls. I never like anything to repeat too much, as you know. So, and then I've got these kit bashed, what I call pillars, sewer pillars. It's all the pieces that you saw earlier, just stuck into a single asset, makes it easy to place it down. Just more things to sort of catch the eye, create some dimensionality, break up any monotony. Now, of course, the most monotonous thing on this map right now is our floor, right? We've got a lot of floor, and we're going to want to break this up. So let's go to our half shadow path. These shadows, by the way, are free. It's in my shadows and lights pack, I think I call it. It's on cartography assets if you ever want to pick it up. It's just all these paths, those shadow objects you saw earlier. It's just so important if you want to create a great map, whether you want to do one quickly and just slap it together, or you want to make a real work of art. Either way, shadows are going to be a major component for how you do that. Now, I'm trying to just figure out how this depression is going to work. I imagine this is where water aggregates and things like that. So I want a bit of a walkway going around. I want something for players to explore. I am, to make those hard lines, I'm holding down shift and creating a spline and then just backing up on that spline, and it can make a nice hard line for you. You can also play around with like the shadow options for, making it less curvy, but I found it's easy just to use that spline trick. All right, so we might make some adjustments here later, but we've broken up that monotony on that floor, and we've created more verticality, more things that could be interesting. And let's don't forget to put our shadows underneath our catwalks. We really do want this to feel like it's up off the ground. And you can see we've already created like, kind of like 3 to 5 sort of sub areas of this map where we can have encounters, we can have storytelling, discovery of different kinds, just by playing with how we break it up. Don't need to be exact with their shadows, but just adding a couple under there just to help those stairs kind of rise up off the ground. Now I've got these really fun overlay patterns, and we're going to play around with how they might work in a space like this. And I like how these are coming together just to show this kind of grading system. Maybe there's some drainage system that goes on down here in this depressed area. And I really like how those grates play there. So that's feeling good. I'm going to show you some other things here in a second with some of these patterns. You notice that those grates are available as a pattern, are also available as a path and even as an object. So you can kind of use them in different capacities depending on what you're trying to build. I really like some of these drains. I could imagine all sorts of nefarious things spawning from a drain like that. And then I've got some of these sort of pipe ends that I just want to kind of put around the walls. I want the players to realize that there's things on the walls as well, and these can help. Of course, maybe I want something to spawn out of these, or maybe they'll serve as an egress point to another map. Maybe I'll add a room as a prefab to this map, and there might be a passage that they discover through one of those pipes. All right, so I did make a prefab that's entirely a workshop, just all kit bashed together, just so it's easy. I just figured with maps like this, you might want to bolt a workshop in any place. And here's a great example. There's a spot that's kind of a perfect fit for a workshop, and I didn't have to go through any of the time to outfit that workshop, right? It's just got a chair and some metal debris and things like that. Now, I want to make this area a little bit more accessible, make it so, players can walk in more areas here. But I also wanted to play with the verticality of this sort of depressed kind of section. So I'm just going to these metal beams that are new and kind of putting them around in a way that I think is believable. Like they could actually be like laying over these spaces like this, and just gives, again, more space for players to walk on. Imagine maybe I have a encounter back here or something like that. And now I'm realizing I really do need some space for players to get back here, right? So I'm seeing that I'm not on a square, and I want to give them a square to walk on. If they're walking up along the top here. Of course, if you get this original map, you can come in here later and you can fill this with water. You can even do that to a degree in Foundry. But that's why I give you guys these maps, is not only so you can deconstruct what I've done, but you can come in here and customize it even a little bit more. Again, just moving things around to give players a full square walkway in both directions. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom layer, fade my double path, try to get it to the right size here. Squeeze that down just a little bit and probably turn off snap to grid. And that gives me a way to draw shadows underneath these. And I'm going to draw them a little bit further away so I can really kind of show the distance between the beams and the bottom of this area here. And you can see just with a few shadows, I've really created that separation. It looks, the illusion is complete, right? I'll make some other adjustments here. And this is, again, just for playability. I don't want any, places on the map that are so inaccessible that they're kind of not worth making in the first place. That's looking pretty good. I'm just evaluating my spaces and seeing, I've kind of got my main areas created now, my sub areas. Now it's really about adding detail. So here's one of the overlays that I've got. This one is for scrap metal. And you can just lay it down, you can rotate it around. It's all tileable. So that scrap metal will rotate around and kind of fill the space perfectly. Because it's not objects, you can see it's really easy to work with. Now this scrap metal is available as an object as well, so you can pepper that into different places. I just wanted to show you how easy it is to fill a space with detail. Now I'm just kind of experimenting with other kinds of overlays that I've created. That one was clockwork. Really felt like it was too much. I wanted a space that was maybe something that was still accessible. Maybe I hide some, iron golems down in here. Maybe there's something to find. Here I'm just using that same pattern. I want to kind of create some consistency here. And moving all my pieces to the back, getting them in the right order. So it's looking pretty good. I like I like this really messy area down here. And now I'm thinking of like, how am I going to make shadows under all this stuff? Because as usual, everything matters. But if I just duplicate it and then I decrease the opacity, I've essentially made a shadow layer, and I just kind of offset it a little bit. And there you go. I've got the perfect shadow layer underneath my scrap metal. So now let's just go to our pipes and fittings, and we're going to go to our scatter tool, and we're just going to scatter some more debris around here just to vary it up a little bit. Maybe this is a laboratory or some kind of machine shop, as I mentioned. Maybe there's something being built here, and this is just scrap metal that gets collected and then reused somehow. It's looking pretty good. Let's go back to our regular object tool, and we'll just add some shadows under these things as usual. Just it makes it more believable. It has them stand out. It's very easy to make things look two-dimensional if you forget the shadows. You don't have to get them perfect, as you see. You just kind of dot them here and there. I'm just experimenting with different kinds of background textures. This is another thing you can come in and customize later. You might want to create more of a color separation between the floor and the other objects. I do have colorable versions of all of these, so I can really create any specific color that I want. They're all towards the bottom of that list of patterns. And again, I'm going to delete these later. I'm just getting a sense of the color palette and if I'm going to want to make any changes. When I say I'm going to delete these later, we're going to use the texture terrain painter to really create some varied terrains. So it's a much better way to make floors if you're looking for like a high level of detail. Certainly not necessary if you're trying to make fast maps, but I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. So let's look at some more pieces. I really want to accentuate kind of other things happening on the map and give that sense of verticality. So you've just got different pipe pieces that help me do that, right? And they just kind of come up to this big component here, and who knows where this leads, but it helps players really kind of get a sense of the space. We want to embed that in with some shadows. Same thing with all of our other pillars and things that we added. So you can see the space is coming together well. It's just feeling pretty good. We have a very, very high amount of detail. And this is, of course, a very large map. You can see the squares to give you a sense of scale. Now we're going to place with some more of these toppers. I like this one. I like that it's got this kind of stone and pipe mix to it. Really helps this feel more like a fantasy setting, even though it's a bit clockwork fantasy, right? Steampunk maybe. And just looking at the different assets, these assets come from this release, but assets from other releases as well, just like what gives me inspiration, what belongs in this space, or what maybe tells a story. These assets are also available as tiles. So when you do get it into Foundry, you can replace and cover a lot of these decisions with new decisions. Right, just assessing. I really like this piece. It has sort of a platform. I like this idea of having a few different workstations or areas where maybe clockwork, uh, enemies have been constructed. I'm just kind of putting this around the scene. I'm above the walls, just seeing where it might fit the best. I'm getting into storytelling mode here, and I'm thinking about tactical battles and how those might look. Okay, so now we've deleted our background, and we're going to start painting in the same exact texture, but this time we're using the terrain brush. And we're going to generally color it in so we don't have any white area in the middle. When I finally export this, the reason I use white is I will select all of that in Clip Studio, and then I will change its opacity to transparent. Something I hope to see in Dungeondraft is the ability to have transparent pixels for the terrain layer. It would be a real game changer, because then you can make things like this without having to use any kind of post-processing. But here I'm just switching to, another terrain, and I'm using it to like really kind of mess up these areas, right? I want it to be really gritty, and this just helps me do that really fast. And because it's just painting, you can really kind of do it anywhere and as much as you want. So I'm doing it very lightly around the top areas, much darker in the depressed area, just again to help create that visual transition. You can see now the lighter sort of top walk area is sort of more obvious. Now we're going to switch back to our pure white paint brush and just clean up some of these areas, because again, when I do post-processing, I'm going to make all the white pixels transparent. And of course, I'll do some cleanup on this before I finally release it, but you can see how quickly this is coming together. I mean, this is a really intense map that's going to cause a lot of muster a lot of like feeling, right? And that's the goal. We want players to sort of start evaluating the space, where the threats might be, how they might use the space, the elevations that they might go after, where enemies might be hiding, that sort of thing. That's just another overlay, just with pipes. You can see you can just rotate it around, throw it in. It just added more clutter. Now I'm back to this. I think I know where I want to put this thing. I think this is the perfect spot for it. Kind of breaks things up, adds an interesting little element over here in the corner. Be having an enemy or a construct sitting on top of that platform at some point. Maybe it's shut down. Maybe the players do something to reactivate it. Give it a little stairway egress. And you've seen me do this before, but I'm going to use, these are from Epsilon's architecture pack. I linked to it. If you ever join my Patreon, I do link to this. It's a great pack, super useful. It's got these, highlights that come as a path, and you can lay them on top of the shadow path to really create that kind of edge that's sort of lit by the light. Anytime you want to create an edge, they're useful for that. And you can see it just creates that separation, makes it clear that that is sort of a stone edge. And these little details, you don't have to do them, but they really do finish a map. Like with any piece of art, you add detail as you go, and the more detail you add, the more the map comes together. Yeah, this is feeling pretty good. Just trying to see what kind of crazy ideas might occur to me that might be happening here in this area. Now, what I have this rubble, various types of rubble, and these are just very effective for messing up a floor. You can see just by changing the color, matching it to the background, and then and lowering its opacity, it stops looking so much like, you know, rocks, and it looks more like distress. And I think it just works really, really well. I kind of cut out where the rubble ended, and you can see it just looks like this area has just been depressed for a while. There's been water runoff. It's collected different kinds of debris and rubble over the years, and it sort of collects down here in this area. Now I'm going to use something from the AOA pack. It's another free pack that I linked to. And I'm just going to help embed that vent into the ground by just picking a black color, lowering the opacity. And just like with shadows, it just helps kind of embed things in. It also adds a little bit of distress, some variation. I like that. Now, I know when I get to Foundry, I want to add some steam coming out of some pipes. So I just thought I'd add a few pipes here that would lend themselves well to having, gouts of steam kind of flow out of them. If you haven't checked out the finished product, you can see my last release, my December release, and you can see what this looks like in Foundry when you've got lighting and ambient sounds and animation and other things added to it. It just brings it all together. I decided I didn't like that clockwork thing, just kind of stuck out. But I do want something here. I want this to be its own area. Maybe this is a goal. Maybe it's the way out, or it's the way deeper into, this sort of dungeon that we've got going. And so I wanted to create this well, but it's got too much wood in it. So, for the environment that we're designing here. So just like anything else, I'm going to kit bash this together, right? So I've got the well, and then I put this nice metal lid on top of it. I'm going to rotate it so that the light hits it in a similar way, right? So I'm going to have the light hit it in a similar place that it's hitting the well. And now it's feeling pretty good. It's a very large hole. In Foundry, I can actually just have a tile that sits on top like a hole, and then players could literally just interact with it. I could have a sound of metal scraping and then have that hole reveal. I'm using my shadows to embed it into that corner really nicely, give it some sense of, foreboding ambiance. And we're almost done here. Just got a few more steps here. I've got this overlay that goes well with the squares underneath it, and this is a way of just breaking up those tiles, the stone tiles. We can just follow it around, and it just makes some of the tiles just look more, maybe like there's been less or more wear on them than others. It's very subtle, I admit that, but it breaks up the space. And whether you notice it consciously with your eye, you notice it unconsciously. And here I wanted there just to feel more like there's some tiles down here. So I'm just using this to create a little bit more separation, kind of accentuate it a little bit. But I hope you guys learned some techniques here. Obviously, these are techniques I've taught to you before. I just use the same techniques over and over again. It's just by changing the assets to this new kind of asset style, it just creates the ability to do so much more in the space. So that's it. As we just kind of scan over our work here, let me know in the comments if there's something I did that you want me to slow down on, or if you have questions or ideas. So maybe you think about the the assets themselves. Is this giving you inspiration for things that you might make? A lot of you sci-fi people are already, your gears are turning. But that's it for today. Thanks everybody for joining me. And until next time, have fun making your maps.